His lips were on my neck when I heard the front door unlock. I shoved him off me so hard he nearly lost his balance. My heart slammed against my ribs as we scrambled apart, breathless, guilty, terrified. Footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. Like he already knew something was wrong. I yanked my sweater down, wiped my mouth, and tried to act like my boyfriend's brother hadn't just had his hands on me. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't plan it, I swear. I loved Adric. He was good to me, better than I deserved. When we started dating, I felt like I'd finally found something real, something solid. And then, slowly, I met his older brother, Roman. At first, he was just there, another part of Adric's life, someone I didn't pay much attention to.
But then, he started looking at me.
In ways I knew I shouldn't let him. And I started looking back. Did I fought it? For months, I told myself it was nothing. A stupid crush, a trick of the mind, a fleeting attraction that would disappear if I ignored it long enough. But it didn't. It got worse. Every time Adric wasn't looking, I felt Roman's eyes on me. Every time we were in the same room, the air felt heavier, thick with something unspoken. It wasn't love. It wasn't even affection. It was something darker, something I didn't have a name for, but craved anyway. I don't know who made the first move. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was both of us at the same time, both too weak to stop what had been coming for months. But it happened. And now Adric was home. He stepped into the room, eyes flicking between us. Roman had already turned away, pretending to scroll through his phone like nothing had happened. I forced a smile. My hands were still shaking. Could he tell? Could he smell the betrayal in the air? Hey, Adric said, his voice light but careful. He looked at me a second too long, his brows pulling together. Everything okay? I nodded too quickly.
Yeah.
Just tired. Roman said nothing. He was already walking away, disappearing down the hall, leaving me alone with my boyfriend. The good one. The one I didn't deserve. Point two, I thought I could stop it. After that night, I swore to myself that I would. That whatever had started between Roman and me would end there.
A mistake.
A moment of weakness. Nothing more. I told myself if I just stayed away, if I avoided him, it would go away. But the problem with fire is, once you've felt its warmth, the cold becomes unbearable. Days passed. Then weeks. And every time I saw him, something inside me pulled, desperate and aching. It wasn't love, but it was something close to hunger. A craving that didn't make sense, that disgusted me even as I fed it. That I kept my distance. At least, I tried to. I stopped being alone with him, stopped meeting his eyes across the room, stopped giving him any reason to think I wanted more. And yet, I felt him everywhere. Point one night, Adric and I went to a party. A birthday, I think. I don't even remember whose. What I do remember is the way Roman looked at me across the crowded room, a glass in his hand, his mouth curled into something between a smirk and a dare. I ignored him. I stuck by Adric's side, laughed at his jokes, kissed his cheek when he leaned in close. I did everything right, and yet, somewhere around midnight, I went to the kitchen to grab another drink. The house was huge, packed with people, music thudding through the walls. I had just poured myself a drink when I felt him behind me. Close. Too close, you're ignoring me. His voice was low, barely audible over the music, but it sent a shiver through me. I kept my eyes on the glass in my hand. I have nothing to say to you.
A lie.
There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. 1,000 things I wanted to do. He stepped closer. I could feel his breath against my neck. You sure about that? I turned then, too fast, and suddenly we were inches apart. His eyes burned into mine, dark and dangerous, and full of something that made my stomach twist. I love Adric. The words felt weak even as I said them. Roman's gaze flicked to my mouth. Then why are you shaking? I had no answer for that. Because he was right. My hands trembled at my sides. My breath was uneven. And, the worst part, I wanted him to touch me. Someone called my name from the other room.
Adric.
My chest tightened. I pushed past Roman, leaving my drink forgotten on the counter, and went back to my boyfriend like nothing had happened, but it had, and it was only a matter of time before it happened again. Point three, it didn't stop. I wish I could say that night was the last time. that I was strong enough to walk away, to be the person Adric thought I was. But I wasn't. It started slow. A look here, a touch there. Accidental, at first. A brush of fingers when he handed me something. A hand on the small of my back as he moved past me. Things small enough to pretend they weren't real. Things I could excuse to myself, to Adric, to anyone who might have noticed. Then it got worse, a stolen moment in an empty hallway. A kiss that lasted too long before we pulled away, panting, guilty, high on the danger of it all. Whispered words in the dark, promises we both knew we shouldn't make. I told myself I wouldn't sleep with him. That was the line I wouldn't cross. But lines blur when you dance on the edge for too long. It happened one night when Adric was away for the weekend. Roman showed up at my door, and I didn't send him away. I should have. God, I should have. But when he kissed me, I let him. When his hands gripped my waist, I didn't pull back. And when he led me to my bedroom, I didn't stop him. It was a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. And the worst part? It didn't even feel wrong in the moment. It felt inevitable lying beside him afterward, my skin still burning from his touch. I thought about Adric, about how he trusted me, about how he would never, ever forgive me if he found out. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this wasn't just a one-time thing, because I wasn't going to stop, and one day, he was going to find out. I thought I could stop it. After that night, I swore to myself that I would. That whatever had started between Roman and me would end there. A mistake. A moment of weakness. Nothing more. I told myself if I just stayed away, if I avoided him, it would go away. But the problem with fire is, once you've felt its warmth, the cold becomes unbearable. Days passed. Then weeks. And every time I saw him, something inside me pulled, desperate and aching. It wasn't love, but it was something close to hunger. A craving that didn't make sense, that disgusted me even as I fed it. That I kept my distance. At least I tried to. I stopped being alone with him, stopped meeting his eyes across the room, stopped giving him any reason to think I wanted more. And yet, I felt him everywhere. It was in the way he leaned against the doorframe when he walked into the room, his eyes finding mine before anyone else's. It was in the way his fingers brushed against my arm when he passed by, the touch lasting just a second too long. It was in the way he smirked whenever Adric kissed me, like he knew something I didn't. One night, Adric and I went to a party. A birthday, I think. I don't even remember whose. What I do remember is the way Roman looked at me across the crowded room, a glass in his hand, his mouth curled into something between a smirk and a dare. I ignored him. I stuck by Adric's side, laughed at his jokes, kissed his cheek when he leaned in close. I did everything right, and yet, somewhere around midnight, I went to the kitchen to grab another drink. The house was huge, packed with people, music thudding through the walls. I had just poured myself a drink when I felt him behind me.
Close.
Too close, you're ignoring me. His voice was low, barely audible over the music, but it sent a shiver through me. I kept my eyes on the glass in my hand. I have nothing to say to you.
A lie.
There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. 1,000 things I wanted to do. He stepped closer. I could feel his breath against my neck. You sure about that? I turned then, too fast, and suddenly we were inches apart. His eyes burned into mine, dark and dangerous, and full of something that made my stomach twist. I love Adric. The words felt weak even as I said them. Roman's gaze flicked to my mouth. Then why are you shaking? I had no answer for that. Because he was right. My hands trembled at my sides. My breath was uneven. And the worst part? I wanted him to touch me. Someone called my name from the other room.
Adric.
My chest tightened. I pushed past Roman, leaving my drink forgotten on the counter, and went back to my boyfriend like nothing had happened, but it had, and it was only a matter of time before it happened again. It didn't take long. The next time was worse. Because this time, I knew I wouldn't stop. It was late, past midnight. I was at Adric's apartment, waiting for him to get home. He'd been out with friends, and I had told him I was too tired to go.
A lie.
I wasn't tired. I was waiting. The knock at the door was soft, hesitant. I opened it without thinking, expecting Adric. But it wasn't him. Roman stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking at me like he had something to say, but wasn't sure if I should have closed the door instead. I stepped aside, he walked in, his presence filling the small space. My heart pounded. I had spent so long pretending I didn't want this, but the second we were alone, all the pretending felt useless. He didn't touch me, didn't move closer, just stood there, watching me, waiting. I was the one who moved first. I don't know if I kissed him because I wanted to or because I wanted to prove to myself that I could stop. That if I gave in, just once, it would be enough to get it out of my system. It wasn't. The second his hands were on me, I knew I had made a mistake. But I didn't stop. It was fast, desperate, nothing like it was with Adric. With Adric, things were slow, careful, sweet. With Roman, it felt like drowning. Like I had been holding my breath for months, and only now was I allowed to breathe. I hated myself for it. After we lay in silence, the weight of what we had done pressing down on me like a physical force, Roman exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "This is bad," he muttered. I let out a breathless laugh. No shit. But neither of us moved. I should have gotten up. Should have told him to leave. Should have told myself this would never happen again, but I knew better because I wasn't going to stop, and one day, Adric was going to find out. I thought the guilt would kill me. That after what happened that night, I'd wake up the next morning and feel so disgusted with myself that I'd never be able to look at Roman again. That I'd never let it happen again, but I didn't wake up feeling guilty. I woke up wanting more. I spent the next day with Adric, pretending like nothing had changed. Pretending like I hadn't spent the night before in his brother's bed, letting him touch me in ways only Adric was supposed to. I laughed at his jokes, kissed his cheek, held his hand like I wasn't a monster. And for a moment, I almost convinced myself I could do this. That what happened with Roman was a one-time thing. That I could forget it, move on, be the person Adric thought I was. Then I saw Roman. It was at Adric's parents' house. A Sunday dinner, like we had every week. I walked in, smiling, greeting everyone like I always did. Then I turned and saw him across the room. He wasn't looking at me. Not really. But I could feel it. That weight. That heat. That invisible thread pulling tight between us. It was unbearable. Every time Adric touched me, I wondered if Roman was watching. Every time I laughed at something Adric said, I wondered if Roman knew I was faking it. Every second that passed, I felt like my skin was burning, like the walls were closing in, like at any moment someone would take one look at me and know. And then, as we sat down for dinner, Roman's foot brushed against mine under the table. It was nothing. A tiny touch. A meaningless accident, but it wasn't. I jerked my foot away like I'd been burned, but I didn't miss the way his mouth twitched into the smallest smirk. I couldn't breathe. I excused myself, muttering something about needing to use the bathroom. I locked the door behind me, gripping the sink so hard my knuckles went white. My heart was hammering, my entire body still buzzing from that stupid, tiny touch. This was dangerous. It had to stop. I had to stop, but then there was a knock at the door, soft. Quiet. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Roman slipped inside without a word, closing the door behind him. We stood there, inches apart, the air between us thick, suffocating. I could hear voices from the dining room. Adric laughing at something their father said. I should have told Roman to leave. I should have shoved him out the door, told him we couldn't do this, that it was a mistake, but I didn't. I let him press me against the sink, let his hands grip my waist, let his mouth brush against mine, tell me to stop. He murmured I didn't, and that was the moment I knew. There was no stopping this. This wasn't a mistake. This was a disaster waiting to happen. I thought I could still control it. That as long as we were careful, no one would ever find out. That as long as I went home to Adric at the end of the day, everything would be fine. But the thing about secrets is that they don't stay hidden forever. It got worse. More reckless. More dangerous. That we started sneaking around whenever we could. A stolen moment in the hallway. A quick kiss when no one was looking. A late-night drive when Adric thought I was at home. That I should have been terrified of getting caught, but I wasn't. I was terrified of stopping point one night. Adric was working late. I told him I was staying in watching movies, getting some rest. Another lie. By now, the lies came easily. Roman picked me up in his car, and we drove out of town, somewhere quiet, somewhere no one would see us. We parked near the woods, the engine still humming, the air thick with something unspoken. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. Maybe we both knew that there was no point in pretending anymore. His hands were on me before I could think. My fingers tangled in his hair. The windows fogged up, the air too hot, too heavy. It was desperate and messy and wrong, so wrong, but I didn't stop, and then my phone rang, a drick, that I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Roman's hand was still on my thigh, his breath warm against my skin. Did I let it ring? Did I didn't answer? I told myself I'd call him back later, that I'd make up some excuse. Another lie. Just one more. What was one more, after everything I'd already done? I kissed Roman instead, and I didn't stop. That I told myself we were being careful. That no one would find out. That as long as we kept it hidden, it wasn't real, but secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks. It started with little things. A glance held too long. A touch that lasted a second more than it should have. Roman looking at me when he thought no one was watching, and then there were my lies. First, they were easy. White lies. The kind that slipped off my tongue without effort. I'm staying in tonight. I'm not feeling well. I have an early morning. I should get some sleep. Adric believed me. Every time. Because, why wouldn't he? I had never given him a reason not to trust me. And maybe that was what made it worse. The fact that he had so much faith in me, even when I didn't deserve it, but I couldn't stop. Every time I told myself it was the last time, I found myself back in Roman's arms. It wasn't love. I knew that much. Love was what I had with Adric, soft, steady, safe. Roman was something else entirely. A storm I let myself get caught in, knowing it would tear me apart. One night, it almost fell apart. Adric and I were at a bar with friends. It was one of those nights that started off light and easy, full of laughter and drinks, the kind of night that made me remember why I had fallen for him in the first place. Then Roman showed up. He wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't even like these kinds of nights out. But suddenly, he was across the room, leaning against the bar, his eyes finding mine like he had been looking for me the whole time. I should have ignored him, but I didn't. The more I tried to act normal, the worse it got. I was hyper-aware of him. The way he moved, the way he laughed at something someone said, the way he kept glancing at me when he thought Adric wasn't looking. At one point, I got up to go to the bathroom, needing air, needing space, needing to get away before I did something stupid. Roman followed me. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. The tension between us was suffocating enough. You need to stop looking at me like that, I whispered, my hands gripping the edge of the sink. Like what? Like you want me? He stepped closer. Maybe because I do. My breath hitched. This is dangerous, I said. Roman's lips twitched into a smirk. That's what makes it fun. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, and I shoved past him, my heart pounding. When I got back to the table, Adric was watching me for the first time. I felt real fear. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, his brows pulling together, his jaw tight. I sat down, forced a smile, acted like nothing had happened, but I could feel a shift. A crack in the foundation. Adric was starting to notice, and I was running out of time. The next time I saw Roman, I told him it had to stop. We were in his car, parked outside my apartment. It was late. Too late. I should have been inside, curled up in bed next to Adric. But instead, I was here, with him. This is getting dangerous, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Roman was silent. I swallowed hard. Adric is starting to notice things. Roman exhaled, running a hand through his hair. So, what do you want to do?
I should have said it right then.
I should have told him this was over, that it had to be, but I didn't because part of me didn't want it to end. Maybe we should slow down, I murmured instead. Roman turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. Slow down? I nodded, but the words felt weak even as I said them. Roman leaned in, his hand brushing against my cheek. Tell me you don't want me, he said softly. Tell me you don't think about me when you're with him. I closed my eyes. I couldn't say it, because it would be a lie, and we both knew it. The breaking point came faster than I expected. One night, Adric asked me if I was happy. We were lying in bed, his arm draped over my waist, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of moment that should have made me feel safe. Instead, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Of course, I said. Forcing a smile, Adric studied me for a long time, then he said, "Are you sure?" My stomach twisted. What kind of question is that? I laughed, but it came out wrong. Too forced. Too nervous. Adric didn't laugh. For the first time I saw it. The doubt. The suspicion. The cracks in the trust he had always had in me. Something had changed. He was watching me differently, and I knew, deep down, that I was losing him, that I had already lost him, but I didn't stop because I didn't know how, because a part of me still wanted Roman, and because a part of me, maybe the worst part, wanted to see how much I could get away with before it all came crashing down, that I should have stopped, I should have walked away, confessed, begged for forgiveness, done anything other than what I did, but I didn't, because some part of me, the darkest and most selfish part, wanted to see how much longer I could keep everything from falling apart. It didn't take long. Adric had started watching me more carefully, his trust eroding by the day. He never said anything outright, never accused me, never let on that he knew, but I could feel it. The way his questions had changed. The way his touch lingered, like he was trying to remind me that he was still here, that I still belonged to him, and yet, I still couldn't stop. The last time I saw Roman before everything imploded, we were reckless. We met in his car, like always. A secret. A shadow. A mistake we both refused to stop making. We should be more careful, I whispered against his lips. Roman smirked, his hands gripping my thighs. You like the risk? I did. That was the problem, but that night, I felt it creeping closer. The end that I didn't know how or when, but I knew we were running out of time, that I didn't know that time was already up. Adric didn't find out because of something I did. He found out because Roman got careless. That it was a message. A simple, stupid message. I was in the shower when it came through, my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Adric was in bed, scrolling through his own phone, not thinking much of it. But the second he saw Roman's name light up my screen, something shifted. I didn't even know until I walked back into the bedroom, my hair dripping, steam still clinging to my skin, but Adric was holding my phone, and he was staring at it like it had just shattered everything he thought he knew. What's this? His voice was too calm, that I frowned.
What?
He turned the screen toward me. A single message, miss you. When can I see you? My entire body went cold. That I opened my mouth, but no words came out because what was I supposed to say? That it wasn't what it looked like? That he was imagining things? That I had an explanation for why his brother was texting me like that. There was no explanation, there was only the truth, and he knew it. Adric stared at me for what felt like forever. His hands were shaking, but his voice stayed eerily steady. Tell me the truth. I should have, maybe if I had, things wouldn't have gotten so bad, but I hesitated. That 1 second of hesitation told him everything. His breathing turned ragged, his eyes flashing with something I had never seen before. How long? I swallowed hard. Adric, how long? His voice cracked, the anger barely holding back the hurt underneath. I couldn't lie.
Not now.
Not when everything was crumbling. A few months. My voice was barely above a whisper. Adric let out a short, breathless laugh. Like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Like he wanted it to be a joke but knew it wasn't you. He ran a hand through his hair, his chest rising and falling too fast. You were with him. My own brother. I felt sick. I'm so sorry. His eyes snapped to mine. Sorry? He let out another sharp laugh. You're sorries? I reached for him, but he pulled away like my touch burned.
Don't, he muttered.
Don't you dare.
I had never seen him like this.
Never seen his face twisted in this kind of pain, and I had done that I had broken him, that I wanted to say something. Anything.
But what could I say?
That I didn't mean to hurt him? That it didn't mean anything? That it was just a mistake? None of those things were true. He grabbed his keys. His movements were stiff, robotic, like he was barely holding himself together. Where are you going? My voice shook. He didn't answer. Then I realized. He wasn't just leaving. He was going to Roman. My stomach dropped. Adric, wait. But he was already gone. That I drove too fast, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was slamming against my ribs, panic clawing at my throat. I had to stop this. By the time I pulled up to Roman's apartment, The front door was already open, and I could hear shouting. I ran inside just in time to see Adric slam his fist into Roman's face. Roman staggered back, his lips split, blood dripping down his chin. But he didn't fight back. He just stood there like he knew he deserved it. Adric's chest heaved, his hands clenched into fists. You were my brother. His voice broke. My own fucking brother. Roman wiped the blood from his mouth. I know. Adric let out a strangled laugh, shaking his head. That's all you have to say? Roman was silent, and that made it worse. Adric turned to me then, and I wished he hadn't, because his eyes weren't angry anymore. They were empty, like I had taken everything out of him, like I had ruined him. Was it worth it? His voice was raw, tears burned my eyes. Adric, please, he shook his head. Don't. I reached for him again, but he stepped back. That was when I knew I had lost him completely, forever. Adric turned and walked out the door without another word, and this time, he wasn't coming back. It's been 6 months. I haven't seen him since he blocked my number. Moved to a different city. He didn't even look at me the last time I saw him, just turned and walked the other way. Roman and I? We didn't last, and I think we both knew we wouldn't. It was never love. It was never meant to be anything real. IT was destruction. IT was a fire that burned everything down, including us, and now I have nothing. I think about Adric every day. I wonder if he's happy. Did I wonder if he's found someone else? Did I hope he has? Because if anyone deserves happiness, it's him, and if anyone deserves to live with the regret of losing him, it's me.